With the addition of mercenaries and secrets of the Atlas, most builds will want to have one to support their characters with buffs and debuffs that complement their builds. To maximize the benefits from our mercenaries, we are going to want to equip them with items that further enhance these buffs and debuffs. Hi, I'm Deconic, and I will be going over some mercenary setups that you can use in 3.26 to enhance your builds with your mercenaries. Now, these setups have been laid out in two different POBs, which will be linked in the description below, for low budget and high budget mercenary setups, respectively. As an early disclaimer, we do not actually know how tanky mercenaries are going to be as a baseline and how much defensive requirement is needed to keep them alive. So for these setups, I have added some defensive items to make them relatively tanky, but not gone overboard so we can still maximize the benefits we're getting. And I have also added some slots to just make sure their resistances are capped if they are not, or if they do not have baseline resistances in some way, shape, or form. But if it ends up that it is not enough, you might have to replace some of the more important items just to keep them alive a bit more. So just wanted to get that out of the way. And then these setups have also been made as generically good as possible to apply to as many builds as possible. This means that they are going to be more specialized setups that you can run for any given build, and you probably get a bit more efficiency out of it, but this should serve as a very good starting point so you can tinker and adjust as needed. We're going to start off with the low budget mercenary setup for like fire builds. Now for this setup, we have opted to use a dread arc, which is typically a cheap item, as well as a direct source courage. The idea here is this applies flammability on hit, and this provides a very easy source of capping your mercenaries block chance when paired with the anvil for just some extra base block chance. Now this, you're going to be using a layer cast for some increased damage, as well as a belly of the beast just for extra life. There are going to be some other options you might decide to go with on the body armor. For example, Cosprey's Will is a decent slot here as well, but belly of the beast is also fine. So it depends on what you're feeling, basically, on how much base life they have. Now, if you decide to go belly of the beast, you can, Cosprey's Will rather, you can opt to skip out on one of these Dodre's Damning, which give you an additional curse. The idea here is you apply elemental weakness through this, you apply flammability here, and if you need to curse yourself, i.e. maybe apply a mark or something, then Cosprey's Will with its extra curse would allow you to do that. And if you do not want to use any curses yourself, then you can opt for belly of the beast. But everything here I've kind of mentioned. Legacy of Fury would be on the more expensive side day one, but should see the prices fall later on, so from day 2, day 3. Now, because of the presence of mercenaries, there's every possibility that this kind of maintains a more expensive price for a bit. Just keep in mind that it is one of the more common drops, so it will eventually drop in price, and it should be a staple option. If this is too expensive, you can also just go for a Windscream or just any random rare boots with sapped ground or something instead. Windscream does the same thing as a Cosprey's Will, in that it is +1 curse and will allow you to go a mark with belly of the beast if you so choose. And then we have Combs Binding, which is a very cheap item, and what it does is it makes nearby enemies convert 25% of their phase to fire, and that is really good defensively to mitigate against physical damage. Basically, it's not going to be permanently up against everybody, but if you're clearing the map, most packs you run into, I assume your mercenary will be ahead of you because he aggroes, and then they should have their physical damage converted. A nice uptime physical damage mitigation layer. Now for the lightning portion, we are basically using the same setup, except since we do not need flammability, we're going to be using Dying Breath. The same argument can be made for Cosprey's Will. You can go belly of the beast instead. Layer cast is kind of standard, and keep in mind for minion players, the increased damage bonus on this stacks with other allies with the same mod. So you can have this on a mercenary and also on an AG. Then you can have curse, then you go for the same curse on hit gloves. You don't care about the stats other than getting resistances maybe, and just making sure it has the implicit. So you apply elemental weakness. Legacy of Fury provides good scorch, which is minus resistances for nearby enemies, so that's always nice to have. And then Purple Store is very important. This is a cheap item. Now, with how much traction this has been getting on YouTube the past few days, I assume it might be on the more expensive side day one, maybe 20C, maybe slightly less, but it should drop very quick because it is a very common unique, very common. So just keep in mind, if you're playing day two, you'll probably be very affordable. Then we use Thief's Torment for elemental resistance. You don't have to use Thief's Torment. You can go for 2 rare rings with elemental resistances. Cosprey's Will is a big source of chaos rares. This is a big source of elemental resistances. If it's too expensive, go for rares. And then you have Combs Binding. You're going to find Combs Binding in most of these setups because it's just such a nice defensive layer. And there aren't too many belts I think are as good, essentially. And then we have the cold version. Cold version is very similar to the lightning, except it's actually pretty much the same. I put the anvil here just to show they're kind of replaceable. If you want to go to the anvil, it gives you some block chance. It's not great by itself without the shield. Again, you don't have to use Dying Breath. Again, you can also just decide to use Obliteration. Will probably be on the more expensive side, but a rare weapon and then or a Sign of the Sin Eater early would be decent, and then you pair it with a shield for block chance, a Dareso's Courage. And this about covers the low budget. There are a lot of other options we have here. Feel free to go through each item slot. That'll kind of give you an idea for what options you have. I've added as many as I could think about, and there are some notable mentions like City Breath, which would only be a use for minion summoning mercenaries, but likely even that you wouldn't use it on them. But it's nice to just keep in mind just in case the minion summoning guys end up being decent. Also, Victory Charities are pretty good for shields because if you pair with a Gravebind, you can get charges. The only problem is Gravebind could be also on the more expensive side early on. So again, keep that in mind. If you're enjoying the content and you haven't already, do consider liking and subscribing as it helps a lot with the algorithm and with our 2025 goal of getting 2,000 subs, after which I will be doing a face reveal on stream and here on YouTube. Now let's go on to the high budget version. We're going to start off with an AG setup. And the reason why an AG setup is here is I'm a minion player by heart, so I would like to have some more details for AG. And 2, mercenaries can use any AG setup because the importance of an AG setup is in the items, but AGs cannot necessarily use mercenary setups because they do not have accessory slots. But this is an explode AG. This is nice because of the explode chest and the Saint Implicit one-handed weapon. This gives them a 50% chance, give or take, to explode on kill, and then you pair that with a Gravebind to make sure nearby enemies dying count as the entity's kill. So like if it's on your AG, counts as your AG's kill. If you decide to do something like this on your mercenary, then it counts as your mercenary's kills and the explode happens essentially. You can dual wield the Saint Implicit hatchet for a higher chance to explode. You can keep in mind, this is one important thing. Mask of the Stage Demon would not be used on a mercenary, but it can be used on an AG. The reason being is this converts ES to life regen, and baseline, if you're going Necromancer, you will have this node that gives your minions 40% of their life as ES, which gives them a lot of percent life regen, like a lot. Like they could be regening their entire life plus a second. And for context, AGs can have like 60k life plus, so it's a lot of regen. Or you can also pair it to Grave Intentions for the same thing on non-necromancers, but you wouldn't do this on a mercenary. But you could instead swap that for like a Crown of the Tyrant on any mercenary, or even just a layer cast, all the same. Then we're going to go into some very interesting high budget mercenary setups. Some of these could be on the squishier side, like you would see here, and this untested, I'll go into it later, but the reason it's untested is we do not actually know how this would work because of certain potential limitations mercenaries could have. We'll go over that in a bit. Starting off with the curse, this setup has you apply about 2 curses and have a free slot for a mark. How do we do that? We are using Anathema to make our mercenaries curse limits equal to their max power charges, which by default is 3. then you're going to use a curse on hit ring, which if you're going for 2 different influences, you can make with an awakener or pretty easily, where you just get an elemental weakness and a frostbite if you're on cold. You can get flammability if you're doing fire damage. You can get conductivity if you're using lightning damage. And so all of a sudden, because of this, you have a curse limit of, you have 2 curses applied by your mercenary, and there's 1 slot your curse could go into, so you do not overwrite, or so your mercenary doesn't overwrite your curses. Rather, if you were to give him a curse limit of 3 and give him 3 curses, he would overwrite your curse every time. But by giving him 3 and a curse limit of 3 and only using 2 on him, that gives you the option of casting a curse yourself. Now, if you were to go the full automated route, then you can get an extra curse on like your gloves or something. But yeah, everything else is pretty straightforward. Kingmaker for the fortification, and crit multi if you're a crit build. Crown of the Tyrants should give you flat damage. Now, only thing that matters for Crown of the Tyrant is the color of the socket. If you're a lightning build, make it blue. If you're a fire build, red. Cold build, green, and then chaos white. And then it reduces nearby enemies' resistances. Grab of the Ephemeral is here if attribute requirements are not a thing for mercenaries. If it is, then we probably can't use this on them. But this makes it so your action speed cannot be reduced below base value, and also makes it so enemies around them cannot crit. It's a nice extra defensive layer. Isn't perfect. You have some blind spots when you're clear maps, but for the most part, it's pretty good uptime. Balakesh here with endurance charges for defenses, and Combs Binding because it's Combs Binding. Why not? And then we leave this slot open so you can cap out their res as needed. And if you need more res slots, your belt is free. You can replace most of these things essentially. You can even go for a shield. Now to move on to the lightning version, this I think is going to be a squishy setup for the mercenary, and I don't know how viable it is, but we'll have to see. Basically, the TLDR is we use Doriani's prototype, which is a chess piece that makes nearby enemies lightning res equal to yours, but then your lightning damage is no longer affected by your lightning resistances. So this effectively means you want to get minus 200 lightning resistance on your mercenary. You can do that with Kalandra touch rings with just minus lightning res. After doing this, you have a very glaring problem, and that is you now have no way to mitigate lightning damage except armor, and armor is very bad for it. What I have opted to do is I have opted for an Eyes of the Great Wolf, which converts 100% of lightning damage taken from hits to a different element, in this case fire. Now the problem with this is you are still very prone to lightning dots, but we are trying to mitigate that to a degree using curse on hit gloves with enfeeble to reduce damage from rare monsters or from monsters, and with Kingmaker with fortification. Now ideally you don't even need Kingmaker, and you would rather have a mercenary that has Enduring Cry or something, a tankier mercenary, so that you can just have the full 20 fortification and benefit from that. Now if you don't have that as a mercenary, you would still stick with the Kingmaker for the fortification. With this glove, you also need a source of plus curse, which we get from the boots. But that's the TLDR of this setup. You can also opt for an Eternal Damnation. It's up to you. With an Eyes of the Great Wolf, you can still go for endurance charges on top of this if you generate it from, like I said, Enduring Cry. That would give your mercenary 12% elemental damage reduction base, and if you were to go some sources of plus to max endurance charges, then this could go a bit higher. Another source would easily be replacing Kingmaker with a +2 eventuality rod. In that case, you would have 5 endurance charges, and that should be what, 20% elemental damage reduction on top of whatever other sources of fortification you would have. Again, the base mercenary matters a lot, and this could still end up being too squishy. So this is why I have labeled it squishy, and it is something that we are going to have to see if it's actually doable or not. But if it is, that would give us so much power, because minus 200 lightning res is a very big multi for lightning damage builds. Then we have a very interesting setup in this untested, and the reason this is labeled untested is it's very contingent on the way ambush charge unique chest piece works. What do we not know here? This chest piece says your nearby party members have maximum endurance charges equal to yours. This means they have to be nearby party members, and we do not actually know if we are considered party members for our mercenaries for the purpose of this item. We do know for the purpose of scaling, they are considered half a party member, so your maps are going to be half a party member tougher, but we do not actually know if this would apply to mercenary or not. If it does, then this is a setup to really watch out for, because thanks to having a shaper influence eventuality rod giving you +2 to max endurance charges, as well as a warlord influence boot with corrupted implicit +1 endurance charge, and 2 comb signs, you are going to be able to get to 10 max endurance charges, and that would be transferred to your player character, i.e. you, if you are considered party members with your mercenary. Now again, it's very we don't actually know if this would work, but if it does, it is going to be a huge defensive layer, because 10 endurance charge is literally 40% physical damage reduction and 40% elemental damage reduction, which is a very big defensive boost if you can actually get to 10. Just keep this setup in mind. I will be testing this setup eventually, and if it works, great. If it doesn't, it is what it is. And then we have the last setup, which is basically a setup that is designed to buff Warcry mercenaries. Now, these are mercenaries that you spawn with base Warcries that you really like and would really help your build. For example, say Battle Mage's Cry. For this, you're going to be using a red blade banner to make sure the Warcries have infinite power. This makes it so you get the max buff effect from whatever Warcry they are using, be it Enduring Cry, Battle Mage Cry, Intimidating Cry, whatever the situation is. This makes it so they always give max buff. And then you have a Combs command, which makes it so corpses explode, dealing damage whenever they do Warcry. So that's just some extra DPS if you so choose to go for it. Again, you still have access to Crown of the Tyrants, Lear cast. Up to you what you decide to do with this one. I opted for Life Res gloves and Life Res amulets. There are options defensively for amulets, but there are also options offensively for gloves. It all depends on you. Legacy of Fury for Scorch, and Dodri's Damning for extra curse. You want Dodri's Damning and potentially a Windscream, because we're going to be using a curse on hit ring. This is completely optional. If you so choose to do it, you can choose literally any setup. The only thing for the Warcry is the shield and the helmet. Anything past that, and you can pick and choose from any of the previously mentioned setups for what best fits your build. These setups should give you a very good starting point for your mercenaries, and enough information to pick and choose what you would like on yours to better suit your playstyle. If you have any questions or suggestions for items I should consider, drop them in the comment section below, as I read every comment. If you made it this far, do consider liking and subscribing, as it helps a lot with the algorithm. And with all that said, thank you for watching.